I want to share LSI's experience of designing a learning system to teach analysis and critical thinking, precisely the things we typically don't think that e-learning can achieve. We've been focused e-learning on pre-positioning it as pre-learning, something you do before you go to face-to-face. We tried to come up with a learning design where we know in humanitarian work we acknowledge experience as the best teacher, so what kind of design pattern can provide more than just instruction, and that's what we actually try to answer through this project. So there's a few things that to consider from completely outside the sector. The first is Kermit Washington. In '76, he's an NBA player, and he's actually his performance is quite poor. And he does something nobody else does at the time. He admits that he still has something to learn and goes for training with a coach. And ultimately, by the end of the decade, becomes an all-star. So the idea that individual performance can improve is something. The other aspect is team performance. And in principle, you're supposed to see, yeah, okay, great. So this is what we all want, right? This is the holy grail of coordination and performance. And in the best of worlds, humanitarian teams in the field do work at this level. So performance at the team level is a second. The third is complexity, the third thing we looked at. So no one actually knows how to operate an aircraft carrier. It's simply too complex. There's no instruction manual. So the instructional design approach fails in this particular context, as it does in many instances in the humanitarian context. So what do we do? How do we teach and learn? What's the pedagogical pattern for that? The fourth one is on knowledge and its changing nature. So if you were a knowledge worker in '86, 75% of what you need to know is right there in your brain. By 2006, that was down to 10%. So figuring out how do we teach and learn, what's the pedagogical pattern through which we can actually convey fast enough how to connect with others. So we looked at a model developed by Bill Cope and Mary Colansis and worked with Bill and Mary around these affordances of learning, looking at e-learning not just for its anywhere, anytime component, but looking at all of the other things we can achieve online that are very difficult to do anywhere else. And actually built a learning system to foster leadership and collaboration, to build connections in a teaching and learning context between teacher and student, but also where students co-create knowledge and co-construct it and work in knowledge communities. And basically replicating the way we want people to work in a team context where the team leader is connected to everyone in the team, but team members are also connected to each other. So how does it work in practice? It's basically 5 or 6 steps, which are very simple. The first one is that learners in the system actually write a work, a case study, a project, a review, a report. And they use an embedded rubric, so they're all writing against the same thing. So here you can see the actual work on the left-hand side, the cognitive piece, and then on the right-hand side is a whole set of tools for metacognition to help learners think about how they're building the knowledge, starting with a rubric, but also a whole host of other things. So by working in a system like this, you move to step 2, you submit your work, and then comes the interesting stuff, comes the knowledge sort of interlinking stuff where you're giving feedback to your peers in peer review. It can be anonymous, which helps. And you're also receiving feedback from 3 other learners. So basically, very quickly and very efficiently, you're sort of crisscrossing analysis, reflection, evaluation, all of the deeper kinds of thinking and learning that we want to foster, and that corresponds and models the way we'd like humanitarians to work together in the field. This is a screenshot, obviously, from some of the metacognitive pieces of such an exercise. So you can see the structure of the work on the left-hand side. And here in this next slide, you can see the score. The scores received from peer review. So this is the average of the scores received from 3 other learners. And you can see that the rubric actually provides both instructions and annotation and comments as inputs for you to think about what this means for your work. And that takes you actually to the next step, which is where you get to revise your work. So you use both the inputs from other learners, but you also use your own reflective process, that what you gain, the value you got from reading the works of others and seeing how they thought through the problem and how they actually wrote it up. And the last piece is, rather than just giving you a badge, what you get is you actually publish your work on your profile and contribute to the knowledge of the community. From a teacher perspective, you get a lot of learning analytics, very rich real-time data about how learners are working in the system and what's actually happening with the knowledge co-construction. This turned out to be quite an amazing experience, and again on the premise that we need a strong pedagogical model, and we also need a structure that can work with the humanitarian realities. So there is a 4-week program in which we move from orientation due to low digital literacy, and then we go through the 3 big steps, which is write your piece, review the work of others, and then revise using the inputs and what you've been learning along the way. There's an alternative model that I think has a lot of potential to accelerate the lessons learned. Key problem for all of us, right? And so we can put returning delegates into a 3-day exercise with the outgoing delegates. So in a 3-day exercise, by the end of the process, you get both the knowledge produced by the returning delegates, but you've also had an intense sort of espresso process in which outgoing delegates get the benefits of the system and the knowledge from the returning delegates. On the costs, it's $550 for the 3-day exercise. That's per learner per day. And it's $650 per learner per day and this will be my last slide right afterwards. So one question is what happens to trainers? Trainers actually have an important role in the humanitarian sector. A lot of people earn their livelihood from training. So instructors become facilitators of knowledge, co-construction, and peer review, a very important and very key role, rather than something in which e-learning actually diminishes what they get to do and how they're recognized. So I've only shown you the pedagogical pattern that we found to work. There's a lot more to unbundling education and looking at how we can rethink, reframe, and reinvent humanitarian education to actually move from that stage that Kermit Washington was at, where nobody, so people were assumed to be naturally good, to a place in which actually driving and developing performance relies on the best available evidence, technology, and pedagogy in order to deliver results.